Hey, I hope you're having a beautiful day. Today I'm here to talk about the angel beast programmings that some toxic parents either subconsciously or totally consciously give to their children. These are two extremes, and it's accompanied by black and white thinking both on the parent and both on the child subsequently due to the poor parenting. So what happens is the parent usually can have BPD or NPD traits, which is borderline or narcissistic traits, where they view their child either as all good or all bad, depending on how they act. There's no unconditional love, there is no real acceptance, there's not really seeing the child in front of them as a separate human being. The parent is either idolizing the child when the child is doing a great job, or devaluing the child when the child is not doing exactly what the parent wants. And with narcissists, this can be programming to groom a golden child. It usually happens with the first child or the only child, and if that programming doesn't succeed, meaning the child is an authentic being, they're not easily controlled, they speak the truth, then the devaluation starts at some age. And what happens is it creates sort of a fractured way of thinking and seeing the world in the child's mind. Also, just like in the parent, is either all good or all bad, and especially if there's not a second parent who is securely attached and healthy, mentally healthy human being who is very, very based and grounded to provide a healthy filter of vision or understanding things. The child only sees that programming and adopts it as its own. As children, we are kind of sponges. We just absorb everything that we're taught, everything that we're told, even before we know how to speak. We understand things prior to that stage. So, this sort of behavior and programming, I call it programming because it can be intentionally done. I speak about this a little bit more in my trauma-based mind control video. Go ahead and watch it afterwards if you feel like it. So with this type of programming, the child is either all good or all bad. They strive to work harder on things than they usually would, and their perception of reality is being fragmented. It's you get this new kind of filter, and the way that child will perceive other people, other situations is changed until they figure out what's going on later in their adult lives. This sort of upbringing is usually passed through the generations. Sometimes it's called a generational curse, a cycle of abuse. It's never too late to break it. When we become adults, we can learn and work hard on separating and individuating ourselves and becoming a separate, sovereign human entity, unit, separated from the family. We don't have to be in the same kind of family dynamics throughout our whole lives. And the more we read about it, the more we educate ourselves, the freer we become. So for a person who doesn't go through that path, and they are so-called behaving on autopilot throughout their programs that they've been given in their early childhood, most in most cases they would have attachment trauma, because a parent like that, a parent who only sees the child through black and white and is not really able to give them unconditional support and love and everything that is needed emotionally for a child to grow in a safe space and learn how to be a secure human being, they would either have an avoidant attachment style or an avoidant fearful attachment style, disorganized attachment style. And what that means is they will either have a fear of engulfment, with relationships with other people, which means they will fear literal emotional intimacy to a certain level. With a different person, it might be a different level. Or they might be fearful avoidant, which means they have this fear and they also have the fear of abandonment. With people who have fearful attachment style, they usually are a little bit more, I don't want to say clingy, but they crave more intimacy, they crave connection, they have a fear of abandonment, and they can project or perceive certain situations that might be minor as something that is way bigger and have meanings that are not really attached to the occasion. For example, not texting them back in an hour or so, they might think that's it, that person doesn't want me anymore, it's the end of the relationship. That's fearful attachment style. Avoidant attachment style is like seeing a text message and being like, oh, I really don't feel like talking to the person right now, just like pushing it back in their consciousness and forgetting about it for like 5 weeks. And then remembering that that person existed and trying to figure out what to do about it. Fearful avoidant is a combination of both, and that can be really frustrating and hard to heal. But I think it's possible. I think we can all reach secure attachment style if we work hard enough on ourselves. So with these two extremes of having fear of engulfment and fear of abandonment, you can feed that programming of black and white thinking, of the angel beast programming, and they work together. It's like a mechanism of preservation where you don't really see people in front of you with all of their richness, all of their colors, with all of their aspects, with all of their good sides, bad sides. You basically are reducing them to objects which are either serving you or not serving you. This kind of perceiving and relating to other people can cause serious problems with long-term relationships. It's very hard to maintain emotional focus on one person, and the object of your emotional relating is changing, and a lot of times it might change from something just as small as the example I gave. Let's say you're a girl and you had a traumatic experience from your father, and you have fearful avoidant attachment style. Your wounds will be around enmeshment and around abandonment, and the way we choose partners, sometimes it's very subconscious, not really in the best way that we can, especially if we don't heal our wounds. So a lot of our romantic partners might be somewhat a representation of a parent figure that we want to have, like an idealized father or an idealized mother. So what happens with real people who are not either black or white, you first meet them, you like them, you idealize them, even if you don't really know that you're doing it. If you haven't healed that sort of attachment style and that sort of viewing people, you might idolize them and think that they're all good, and you want to connect with them as much as possible and bring sort of a merging with them, just like borderlines do. And then one day they do something as small as sneeze the wrong way, or it can be something super personal. I don't know, wear the wrong type of clothing, and you just realize this is not an ideal person for me. I'm just not gonna like them anymore, and a splitting comes. And this is not necessarily a splitting of dissociation, even though that's how the literature explains it. I think it's a wrong use of the word, me personally thinking that way. But the way it happens is that person becomes all black, and you don't see them as that perfect sort of parent replacement anymore, and you devalue them, and that person is depersonalized, dehumanized. It's becoming an object of your anxieties, and what happens is you sort of start inflicting revenge on them. And what that revenge is, it's basically your childhood wounds that that same-sex parent caused to you, you're doing to them. So if you're really avoidant, you might, just dump that person in a text or ghost them out of nowhere without working on the relationship or telling them what's wrong. And it can be very personal. It can vary in terms of the timing that your parent did this to you. It can be around holidays, it can be around how they did it. If they said a specific word, you might use that word on that person, and you might repeat that cycle of relating with romantic partners throughout your life, time and time again, without even realizing that that's what you're doing. But when you reach your 20s, your 30s, your 50s, you might realize that there's a common theme in there. The way things end, the thing that actually causes them to end. And it's almost as if that person never had a chance. They never did. It's not really almost as if that's the case, because none of us are perfect. All of us are bound to fall from grace with that sort of programming in a partner. So that person never really had any chance. They were never going to be perfect, and you're just going around inflicting wounds on other people without really realizing what you're doing. And I think this becomes conscious when we start to be a little bit more self-aware and aware of our emotions in the moment, present in the moment, and aware of our thought forms, our thinking, our thoughts when we meditate. And we can fix this, because we don't need to inflict wounds that were inflicted on us, especially on people who never did anything bad to us. It's really dangerous to have a victim mentality. I've come to realize that the more you're into that victim sort of thinking, the more dangerous you can be to the world, because if you believe that what you're doing is justified, there's literally no limit to it. And I think that's a dynamic that a lot of serial killers are using, and especially there's this movie called The Cell. It's really interesting in that regard. The way the mother figure has damaged a male criminal serial killer. So yeah, that was something I wanted to talk about today, kind of break it up, the pattern. And I just really want to say that it's really hard to get over black and white thinking. It's almost as if the world is pushing us in that direction. Acceptance is not really something that we see anymore much anywhere, not in movies, not in the media, especially not in public places, work. Everybody's very judgmental, and you always have to fit in this tiny box of things that are acceptable by society. But it's important to remember that we are not just plastic dolls, we're not rigid people, and there's always going to be someone who won't like you. You can't really please everyone, and no one is going to be exactly perfect just the way you want them to be. And we're all changing all the time. That's the constant in life. So there's no way we can ever reach perfection, because perfection doesn't exist from now till 3 seconds from now, because we can change our mind and we can change the way we are. And I think if we push change into a more positive space of learning how to accept ourselves, learning how to feel our own feelings, and strive to be more healthy mentally, and try to accept people for what they are and not reject them, not wound them unnecessarily, we would have much better society, much better future, much better world to live to our children. So I hope you have a good day, and want to wish you a beautiful week. I'm gonna see you soon. Bye.